Most people think the hardest worker earns the most money. That's one of the biggest career myths ever created. Two people, same company, same salary. 5 years later, one now earns $94,000, the other still earns $61,000. They sat 10 feet apart. To everyone around them, they looked equally successful. Here's what everyone missed. The lower-paid employee worked harder, measurably harder, more hours, better reviews, never called in sick. That gap didn't come from intelligence. It didn't come from luck. It didn't even come from working harder. It came from one invisible number. A number almost nobody tracks. A number your employer is quietly estimating right now that you've probably never even heard of. We'll come back to it. That number is exactly what this video is about. You already know the feeling. It's a Tuesday, maybe 7 p.m. You're still at your desk or still on the laptop at the kitchen table, finishing something that technically ended at 5. You're not complaining. You've just internalized this idea that effort compounds, that the people who get ahead are the ones who put in more, that if you just keep doing this, eventually it pays off. I'm not here to tell you that's wrong. I'm here to show you it's incomplete. Working harder can absolutely raise your income, only if you're working on your market value, not your workload. And the data on this is brutally clear. It does not say what most people assume. So, let's start with what actually happens when you work harder inside a normal company. You're earning $62,000. Doesn't matter if it's operations, finance, or marketing. You have a manager, but your manager doesn't decide your salary. The budget does. And that budget has a merit increase line, one that at most mid to large companies sits somewhere between 3% and 4.5% of your salary. Budgets don't care how exhausted you are. That's not a low performer's ceiling. That's everyone's ceiling. The top performer in your department and the person doing the bare minimum are pulling from the exact same pool. In a good year, the gap might be 1.5 points. In a lean year, less. So you stay late on Tuesday. You solve on Saturday what someone else would have left until Monday. You take the project nobody wanted. And your reward inside this system is that you might land 4.5% instead of 3%. On $62,000, that's $930 more a year before taxes. Depending on taxes where you live, that can easily end up around $600, $50 a month. Read that again. $50 a month for an entire year of staying late, solving other people's problems, and giving up your evenings. That's what your Saturdays were worth. That's what your exhaustion was priced at. That's not because your employer is cruel. It's because the structure has a ceiling built into its architecture, and effort alone was never going to raise it. This isn't a flaw in the system. This is the system. It was never designed to reward your hardest year. It was designed to retain you through it. The system doesn't need to stop rewarding effort. It only needs to reward it just enough that you never question where the ceiling actually is. Now, here's the part almost nobody explains to you. You ever notice that the harder something makes you work, the more you convince yourself it has to be worth it? That's not optimism. That's your brain protecting an investment it already made. There's a name for it: effort justification. The more time and energy you sink into something, the more your mind insists the payoff must be proportional. Not because the evidence says so, because admitting otherwise means admitting the sacrifice didn't buy what it was supposed to buy. And that's an uncomfortable place to stand. So you stay, you work harder. You tell yourself next year's review will be different. And it is by about 1.2 percentage points, which doesn't move the ceiling, it just makes the ceiling feel a little more fair. Here's the sentence I want you to actually sit with. In many organizations, your company isn't primarily paying you for effort. They're paying you for how difficult you'd be to replace. If nobody ever explained that to you either, that's exactly why I make videos like this. Subscribe, because what comes next is the part most people either don't know or don't want to hear. Everything you've been told about getting promoted assumes companies pay for effort. Most don't. They're not buying your hours, they're buying capability they can't easily replace. You've been optimizing for one scoreboard. The market has been keeping a completely different one. Employees think they're negotiating salaries. Markets are pricing assets. One of the biggest forces shaping your pay isn't how hard you work, it's how expensive replacing you would be, what it would genuinely cost your employer to find, Hire, train, and ramp up someone who could do what you do. Every year, your employer is quietly updating one number, not your performance rating, your replacement price. Most employees spend their entire career trying to improve the wrong one. And this is exactly where the two people from the start of this video split apart. The stayer worked harder inside the structure. More hours, more output, better reviews. The other one worked harder on their replacement cost. 18 months building one specific, verifiable, in-demand skill. Not a general one, a precise one. Something competitors would have had to spend real time and real money finding somewhere else. They weren't smarter. They weren't luckier. They just became expensive to lose. The company rewarded consistency. The market rewarded scarcity. Those are two completely different currencies. You thought you were competing against your coworkers. You were actually competing against your replacement. Sit with this for a second. Workers who switch employers consistently walk away with bigger pay jumps than workers who stay. Federal Reserve data and compensation research from PayScale have shown this for years. That's not a small gap. That's a structural fact. It's not because companies are villains, even though the incentive structure quietly produces that outcome anyway. It's because the market prices outside candidates at market rate and prices you, the loyal one, at retention rate. Two different numbers, and almost everywhere, market rate wins. Right now, some of you are thinking, so are you saying loyalty doesn't matter? Loyalty isn't what increases your salary. Loyalty determines how long you'll accept a salary someone else would refuse, which means the person who never leaves, who stays loyal and trusts the system will eventually notice, is often financially subsidizing the raises of the people who don't. The company never needed to convince you that you were worth less. It only needed to make sure you never discovered what someone else would pay. That's why two people can spend 5 years sitting 10 feet apart and end up living completely different financial lives. Now, let me complicate this, because effort isn't irrelevant. Effort with no strategic direction gets you better at your current job, inside your current salary band, at exactly the pace your employer's budget allows. That's it. That's the ceiling. Effort redirected towards a skill the market specifically pays for, towards visibility outside your current company, towards actually knowing what your work is worth elsewhere, produces something completely different. Let me show you what this looks like in real numbers. Think back to the two people from the beginning. Same company, same desk, 10 feet apart. One ended at $94,000, one at $61,000. Here's what happened between those numbers. Two project managers, same starting salary, $58,000. 2 years in, both good at the job, both getting strong reviews. Timeline 1, work harder inside the structure. $61,000 by year 2, maybe $64,000 by year 4. A promotion if you're lucky with a 10% bump, landing you at $70,400 by year 5 or 6. Timeline 2, work on replacement cost instead. Month 1, nothing happens. It doesn't feel like progress. Month 6, still nothing you can point to. Month 10, an email. Month 11, an offer. $74,000. Same hours invested, same person, completely different number, and it arrived 2 years earlier. And here's the part that matters. This isn't the internet hustle version of build your brand or become an entrepreneur. That's mostly noise. What actually moves the number is quieter and far more mechanical. One question: what specific capability would make me significantly harder to replace, and how long would it take to build it? That question doesn't need more hours. It needs some of the hours you're already spending on output that was never going to move your ceiling, redirected towards something that does. For some people, that's a certification. For some, it's rare domain knowledge. For some, it's relationships in a field where who you know decides what you're offered. The specific answer changes. The framework underneath it doesn't. Picture the same Tuesday night playing out 2 different ways. One version, you close the laptop and feel the quiet satisfaction of having genuinely put in the work. That feeling is real. It's not nothing. The other version, you close the laptop at the same time, sometimes earlier, and spend 45 minutes on something that doesn't feel like work yet. A course, a side project outside your job description, A conversation with someone doing the job you actually want. No immediate feedback. Doesn't feel productive the way finishing a task feels productive. The difference was never discipline exactly. It's that one of them stopped expecting the structure to reward effort and started building something the structure would eventually have to bid for. The biggest career mistake was never laziness. It's becoming exceptionally good in a place that already decided years ago what you're worth. 5 years, $33,000 apart. The difference wasn't effort. It was the number neither of them knew they were being measured by. The market isn't built to reward the hardest worker. It's built to reward the hardest person to replace. That's replacement cost. And for many careers, it's one of the numbers quietly shaping the opportunities available to you. Work hard if you want to. Just stop spending it all on the thing that already hit its ceiling. Start spending some of it on becoming impossible to replace. Effort gets you praised. Scarcity gets you paid. That's the whole difference between pushing against a ceiling and never having one. Because the people who earn the most were never the ones who worked the hardest. They're the ones the market refused to lose. Because replacing them became more expensive than competing for them. Tomorrow morning, nothing in your office will have changed, except the way you see it. You'll realize every meeting, every project, every late night has been quietly changing one number. Not your performance, your price.